You have a specific habit that is quietly exhausting your soul, and you have never been given the language to name it. When you look at people, you do not see them as they are. You see them as what they could be. You project your own integrity onto the unfaithful, your own work ethic onto the lazy, and your own loyalty onto those who would replace you in a week. And when they inevitably fail to meet the standard of the fantasy you authored in your own mind, you feel betrayed, you feel naive, you feel foolish. But according to Carl Jung, this is not betrayal. This is the collapse of a psychological projection. The day you stop romanticizing potential is the day you become genuinely unshakable. You did not get fooled. You were authoring fiction about real people and then feeling shocked when they refused to read your script. Sit with that for a moment, because it dismantles everything you thought you understood about your own disappointment. You believed you were being open-minded. You believed you were giving people the benefit of the doubt. You believed you were being a good, generous, evolved human being who sees the best in everyone. But Carl Jung would tell you that you were doing none of those things. You were performing an act of psychological projection so sophisticated and so constant that you mistook it for kindness. You were hallucinating depth in shallow people. You were imagining strategy in chaotic people. You were inventing loyalty in transactional people. And every single time reality corrected your fiction, you called it heartbreak instead of calling it data. This is the silent wound of the highly aware mind, and it is the reason your emotional intelligence has become a trap instead of a gift. Because intelligence without detachment is just a more elegant form of self-betrayal. You have been told your whole life that your sensitivity is a superpower, but no one warned you that an unregulated superpower will consume the one who wields it. The shadow psychology that Carl Jung mapped over a century ago is not some mystical concept reserved for academics. It is the operating system running silently underneath every disappointment you have ever experienced. And until you bring it into the light, it will continue to write checks your peace of mind cannot cash. The inner sovereignty you are reaching for is not built by trying harder, loving harder, or believing harder. It is built by seeing accurately, and that is what you are about to learn. By the end of these next minutes, you will never again confuse projection with perception, and you will never again call it betrayal when someone simply behaved consistently with who they have always been. If these ideas resonate with you, hit that subscribe button for more top-tier content. Also, drop a illusion ends in the comments so I know you're ready. Let's dive in. Here is the uncomfortable truth. No therapist will phrase this directly. When you assume someone is honest, it is because honesty lives inside you. When you assume someone has good intentions, it is because good intentions live inside you. When you assume someone is loyal, capable of growth, and quietly trying their best, it is because all of those qualities are residents of your interior world. You are not seeing them. You are reading your own internal scripture and assuming the person across from you is reading the same book. They are not. Most people are not even literate in the language of integrity you fluently speak. Carl Jung gave this phenomenon a name that you must memorize because it will become the single most clarifying concept in your psychological life. He called it projection. And projection is not a flaw of the weak-minded. It is a default function of the deeply principled. You project precisely because you have something internal worth projecting. The shallow do not project depth. The disloyal do not imagine loyalty in strangers. The careless do not assume care in others. Only the substantial commit the error of assuming substance in everyone they meet, which means your repeated disappointment is not evidence of your foolishness. It is evidence of your richness. But evidence of richness is not a virtue if it leaves you exhausted. This is where shadow psychology becomes essential, because the moment you understand that your perception of others is a mirror reflecting your own goodness back at you, you stop blaming them for what they failed to deliver, and you start auditing what you assumed they possessed. The disappointment then dissolves at its root. It does not require their apology. It does not require their accountability. It simply requires your awareness. And awareness, in the framework of Carl Jung, is the beginning of true detachment, the beginning of authentic self-mastery, and the beginning of a life where no human being can blindside you again, because you stopped writing them into a story they were never cast for. Every person you have ever met wears a persona. Carl Jung borrowed that word from ancient theatre, where the persona was literally the mask an actor held to project a character to the audience. And in modern life, the persona is the carefully curated version of self that people present at the dinner table, in the interview, on the first date, in the family gathering, and in the office meeting. The persona is not necessarily a lie. It is a performance, and the performance is not the problem. The problem is your habit of mistaking the performance for the person. You meet someone, they show you their highlight reel, and within minutes you are casting them in the role of trusted partner, dependable friend, future ally, or kindred spirit. You skip the entire chapter that exists between the persona and the reality. You skip the observation phase. You skip the data collection. You skip the patient, unhurried, almost clinical study of who they are when no one is watching, when something inconvenient is required of them, when their interests do not perfectly align with yours. The strategist within you, the part of you that Carl Jung would call the integrated observer, knows that the persona is a doorway, not a destination. But the projector within you keeps walking straight through the doorway and decorating the entire house before checking whether the foundation exists. This is the architectural error of your social life. You are building emotional structures on facades, and when the facade inevitably reveals itself to be just that, a facade, you experience the collapse as betrayal when it is actually just gravity. Inner sovereignty begins the moment you accept that every persona is a hypothesis, not a conclusion. You do not need to tear off anyone's mask. You do not need to confront them. You do not need to demand authenticity. You simply need to watch, quietly, patiently, without commentary, because the persona always cracks under enough time, enough pressure, and enough unguarded moments. And what slips through the cracks is the actual person. Your job is not to judge what you see. Your job is to record it, to file it, to let it inform your future decisions without contaminating them with emotion. This is what Carl Jung meant by the highest form of intelligence. It is not the absence of perception. It is the refusal to confuse perception with reaction. And once you internalize this, you will notice something extraordinary. The people around you will not change, but your experience of them will become radically, almost shockingly accurate. Which leads us into the third recognition, the one that permanently alters how you process every interaction for the rest of your life. There is a part of you that you have been suppressing for years, and that suppression is the source of your chronic disappointment. Carl Jung would call it your shadow. The disowned aspect of your psyche that contains everything you were taught was unacceptable to feel, to think, or to express. And inside your shadow lives a figure of immense strategic value, a figure you have spent your entire life denying because polite society told you he was cold, harsh, or unkind. He is the cold evaluator. He is the part of you that is fully capable of looking at a person and silently noting their inconsistencies, their patterns, their broken promises, and their character data without rushing to excuse it, contextualize it, or rescue them from your own observations. You have been told your whole life that judging people is wrong, that everyone deserves endless grace, that you should focus on the good and ignore the rest. And so you exiled the cold evaluator into your shadow, where he has been growing more powerful, more frustrated, and more accurate with every betrayal you refuse to acknowledge in real time. Shadow psychology teaches that what you exile does not disappear, it simply gains influence from underground. Which is why, in your most exhausted moments, you suddenly feel an overwhelming wave of cynicism, mistrust, or contempt that seems out of character. That is not you breaking. That is the cold evaluator breaking through the wall, finally trying to deliver the report you have been refusing to read for years. Integration, in the Jungian sense, is not the elimination of this figure. It is the conscious invitation of this figure to the strategic table of your mind. You do not become him. You partner with him. You let him whisper observations while your warmer, more generous self remains the public-facing diplomat. The result is a person who is outwardly kind and inwardly precise, warm in tone, surgical in assessment, generous in gesture, calculated in trust. This is the architecture of self-mastery. This is the foundation of inner sovereignty. And this is why the most psychologically integrated people in your life seem unreadable to others. It is because they have stopped broadcasting their evaluations. They feel no need to argue, confront, or correct. They simply observe, file, and adjust their proximity accordingly. The cold evaluator, properly integrated, does not make you bitter. He makes you accurate. And accuracy is the precondition for every meaningful boundary you will ever set. But this recognition leads to a deeper psychological boundary that permanently alters how people treat you, and you must understand it now. Imagine for a moment that you are a researcher. You have been assigned to study a particular subject, and your only job is to record what the subject does. You do not coach the subject. You do not lecture the subject on what they should do. You do not feel personally injured when the subject behaves according to their established patterns. You simply observe and document. This is the psychological posture Carl Jung was pointing toward when he distinguished judgment from observation. Judgment requires emotional investment in an outcome. Observation requires only the patience to see what is. And the day you adopt the clinical observation protocol is the day disappointment quietly exits your life. Because disappointment is mathematically impossible when you have no expectations contaminating your data. Let that land. Disappointment is not caused by other people's behavior. Disappointment is caused by the gap between your projection and their reality. Close the gap, and the disappointment vanishes. Not because you became numb, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped writing fiction and started reading fact. The shift sounds simple. It is not. It requires you to surrender the most addictive drug in the human psyche, the drug of hope-based perception. You have been getting high on imagined potential for so long that sober reality will initially feel like withdrawal. You will look at someone you used to romanticize, and you will see them clearly for the first time, and a part of you will mourn the fantasy. Let it mourn. The mourning is the cost of admission to a life where you are never again blindsided. The clinical observation protocol does not mean you become emotionally unavailable. It means you become emotionally accurate. You still feel warmth, you still extend kindness, you still build connections, but you do all of this with full data, not with manufactured data. You stop investing 7 units of trust in someone who has demonstrated 3 units of consistency. You stop offering 10 units of loyalty to someone who has shown you 2. The investment becomes proportional to the evidence, and the evidence is gathered through patient, unhurried, almost scientific observation of how a person actually behaves over time, under pressure, when inconvenienced, when nothing is in it for them. This is detachment in its highest form, not the cold absence of feeling, but the refusal to be governed by what you wish were true. And here is what is fascinating. The moment you adopt this posture, people sense it. They cannot articulate it, but they sense that you are no longer projecting. They sense that you are seeing them. And the ones who depended on your projections to extract from you will quietly retreat, because the supply has been cut, while the ones who are substantial will lean closer, because for the first time they are being seen by someone who actually sees. This is the psychological gravity of inner sovereignty. It does not push people away, it filters them. Now you must understand what you are building, because without a clear vision of the destination, the discipline of the journey will feel arbitrary. What you are constructing inside yourself is what Carl Jung implicitly described as the integrated self, and what we will call the sovereign frame. The sovereign frame is a psychological architecture in which your sense of stability, value, and direction is generated internally rather than borrowed from the behavior of others. In the old frame, your peace was held hostage by other people's choices. If they showed up, you were fine. If they disappointed you, you were destabilized. If they validated you, you felt worthy. If they ignored you, you felt diminished. That entire arrangement was a sovereignty leak. You had outsourced the regulation of your inner state to people who did not even know they had been hired for the job, and who would have declined the position had you been honest about its responsibilities. The sovereign frame retrieves that outsourced authority. It declares, silently and without announcement, that you are the final regulator of your own psychological climate. People may bring weather, but you are the atmosphere. Their inconsistency cannot become your instability. Their disloyalty cannot become your devastation. Their indifference cannot become your insecurity. Not because you have armored yourself against feeling, but because you have rooted yourself in something deeper than their behavior. This is the practical fruit of shadow psychology, the lived expression of emotional intelligence, the daily practice of self-mastery, and it produces a quality that observers will describe as composure, but that you will recognize internally as something far more interesting. It is the quiet certainty that no single human interaction can rewrite your worth, because your worth was never up for negotiation. Within this frame, you will find that your relationships transform without your having to renegotiate a single one of them. You will find that the dynamic shifts even when you say nothing. You will find that people respond to the gravitational field of your inner state more than they ever responded to your words. Because Carl Jung was correct in his deepest assertion, what is inside in the unconscious becomes our fate, and we call it destiny. You are no longer leaving your fate to the unconscious projections you used to broadcast onto everyone around you. You are reclaiming the unconscious, integrating the shadow, partnering with the cold evaluator, and installing a frame that cannot be shaken by the predictable behavior of unpredictable people. And what happens next, in the final integration, will reorganize your relationship with every single person currently in your life. There is a particular posture that emerges in a person who has fully completed this work, and you have probably encountered it once or twice in your life without understanding what you were looking at. It is the quality of someone who seems pleasant but uncapturable, warm but unreadable, present but never quite owned by the room they are standing in. They listen more than they speak. They observe more than they react. They give measured responses where others give exhausting monologues. They walk away from conversations that the rest of us would have stayed inside trying to win. And they do all of this without performing any of it. That is the untouchable posture, and it is the natural byproduct of everything you have just absorbed. You become untouchable not because you have built walls, but because you have built clarity. The two are entirely different architectures. Walls keep everything out and exhaust the one maintaining them. Clarity simply lets everything in, processes it accurately, and responds proportionally. Nothing is repressed, nothing is denied, nothing is dramatized. The untouchable posture is the lived signature of a person who has stopped romanticizing potential and started honoring reality. They no longer wait for people to become who they imagined them to be. They engage with who is actually standing in front of them, and they engage to the exact degree that reality warrants. This is the highest expression of detachment in the Jungian framework. It is not coldness. It is not aloofness. It is not the performance of indifference. It is the lived consequence of accurate perception. And the strangest gift of the untouchable posture is that it draws the right people closer while quietly dissolving the wrong ones from your orbit. The manipulators lose interest because there is nothing to manipulate. The energy vampires drift away because there is no leak to feed on. The performative friends slowly fade because their performance no longer earns the applause it used to extract from your projections. And in the space they vacate, something remarkable enters. Real people. Substantial people. People who do not need to be romanticized because their actual reality is already enough. Carl Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And who you truly are, underneath all the projection and all the disappointment and all the rehearsed hope, is a clear-sighted observer, a sovereign mind, a composed presence, a person who finally sees. You did not arrive here by accident. You arrived here because something inside you had been quietly demanding this recalibration for years, and you finally answered the call. You came here believing that you had been betrayed by people, and you are leaving with the understanding that you were never betrayed. You were simply running an outdated psychological program, one that projected your own substance onto the unsubstantial and then registered the inevitable disappointment as personal injury. That program is now closed. Carl Jung gave us the language, shadow psychology gave us the map, detachment gave us the discipline, inner sovereignty gave us the destination, and self-mastery is the daily practice that holds it all together. You are no longer the chronically disappointed projector. You are the clinically observant strategist. You are no longer the one who hopes people will become who you imagined. You are the one who watches who they actually are and adjusts the entire structure of your life accordingly. The cold evaluator is integrated. The persona no longer fools you. The sovereign frame is installed. The untouchable posture is yours to occupy. From this point forward, no one in your life can blindside you because you have stopped writing fiction and started reading fact. You have stopped romanticizing potential and started honoring reality. The illusion ends here. If this transformation landed in you, drop the word observe in the comments. Not as a comment, as a declaration, as the quiet psychological signature of someone who has crossed a threshold and does not intend to cross back. And if you are ready to stop bleeding peace through your projections and start building a life of clarity, sovereignty, and clinical composure, subscribe. This is the only place where deep psychology is not delivered as therapy, but as architecture. Not as comfort, but as construction. Not as healing, but as upgrading the entire system you use to interpret the human beings around you. And whatever you do, don't stop now. The on-screen video matters more than you think. Trust me, you don't want to miss it. I'll see you there. See what others miss, know what others fear, become who others can't.